Have you ever wondered how one small act of kindness could change everything? In the heart of New York City, where ambition often outweighs integrity, a young woman named Emily Carter chose compassion over judgment, and it turned her world upside down. What she didn't know was that this single decision would set off a chain reaction of love, betrayal, revenge, and redemption. This is her story. Are you ready to find out what happens next? Let me know if you'd like any tweaks. In the heart of Manhattan, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams seemed just within reach, stood Luxe Elite Boutique, a high-end fashion store known for its glitz, glamour, and exclusivity. It was here that our story begins, with Emily Carter, a young woman whose life had been anything but glamorous. Emily was only 22 years old, but she carried herself with the weight of someone much older. Her parents had passed away in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving her to care for her younger brother, Jake, who was just 10. With no other family to turn to, Emily became both mother and father to him, working tirelessly to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She worked at Luxe Elite Boutique as an assistant sales associate, a job she hated but couldn't afford to leave. Every day at work felt like walking through a battlefield. Victoria Hayes, the ruthless store manager, made sure of that. Victoria was tall, impeccably dressed, and had a sharp tongue that could cut glass. She despised anyone who didn't fit into her polished world, and Emily, with her thrift store blazers and worn-out shoes, was an easy target. Victoria often assigned Emily menial tasks, running errands, organizing stockrooms, or cleaning up after customers, instead of letting her make actual sales. "You're not exactly boutique material, are you?" Victoria would sneer whenever Emily dared to ask for more responsibility. To make matters worse, the other employees followed Victoria's lead, treating Emily like she was invisible unless they needed someone to blame for misplaced inventory or slow sales. Despite all this, Emily tried her best to stay positive. She reminded herself daily that this job paid the bills and gave her flexibility to take care of Jake. Still, there were moments when the frustration bubbled over, like today. It started innocently enough. A customer walked into the store, catching everyone's attention immediately, not because he looked wealthy, but because he looked so out of place. His name was Henry Bennett, though no one knew that yet. He was an elderly man, probably in his late 70s, wearing a faded jacket patched at the elbows and scuffed leather shoes that had seen better days. His gray hair was thinning, and his hands trembled slightly as he clutched a small shopping bag. The moment Henry stepped inside, the air shifted. Victoria spotted him first and rolled her eyes dramatically before turning to whisper something to another employee. They both laughed under their breath, exchanging smirks. Then Victoria approached Henry, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "This is a luxury boutique. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable shopping elsewhere." Henry blinked, clearly taken aback by her rudeness. I'm just looking," he stammered, clutching his bag tighter. "My wife used to love places like this. I thought maybe—" "Oh, spare us the sob story," Victoria interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "We don't have time for window shoppers. Please leave." Emily watched from across the room, her stomach twisting with anger and shame. She wanted to say something, to defend the poor man, but fear held her back. What could she do? Standing up to Victoria meant risking her job, and losing her income wasn't an option right now. So instead, she busied herself folding scarves behind the counter, pretending not to notice. But then Henry spoke again, his voice trembling but resolute. "You know," he said softly, "money doesn't define worth. Neither does clothing. Some of us may not look like we belong here, but we're still human beings deserving of respect." The room fell silent. Even Victoria seemed momentarily stunned by his words. For a brief second, Emily caught Henry's gaze. There was sadness in his eyes, yes, but also a quiet dignity that struck her deeply. In that moment, she realized how tired she was of staying silent, of letting people like Victoria treat others, and herself, with such disdain. As Henry turned to leave, Emily finally found her voice. "Wait," she called out, surprising even herself. Everyone turned to look at her, including Victoria, whose expression darkened instantly. "Yes?" Henry asked, pausing near the door. "I'm sorry about how you were treated," Emily said, stepping forward despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. "If there's anything I can do to help, or if you'd like me to show you some items, I'd be happy to assist." For the first time that day, Henry smiled. It was small, but genuine. "Thank you, my dear," he said kindly. "That means more than you know." Victoria scoffed loudly. "Emily, what are you doing? We don't waste time on charity cases." Ignoring her boss, Emily walked over to Henry and gently guided him toward a display of ties. As she began showing him different options, she felt a strange sense of empowerment, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things didn't have to stay the way they were forever. Little did Emily know, this encounter with Henry Bennett would change everything, for better or worse. As Emily stood beside Henry Bennett, showing him the selection of ties, she couldn't help but notice how different he seemed from the usual clientele at Luxe Elite Boutique. While most customers strutted through the store with an air of entitlement, Henry moved slowly, deliberately, as if every step carried a weight far heavier than his worn-out shoes. His hands trembled slightly as he examined the silk ties, and there was a sadness in his eyes that tugged at Emily's heartstrings. The other employees, however, weren't nearly as empathetic. Olivia, Victoria's loyal sidekick, leaned against a nearby display case, smirking openly. "Look at her," Olivia whispered loudly to another coworker. "She's wasting her time on some old beggar who can't even afford a coffee here." Victoria herself didn't bother whispering. She crossed her arms and glared at Emily, her lips curling into a sneer. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We're not running a charity shop, Emily. Stop embarrassing yourself, and us, by pandering to people who don't belong here." But Emily ignored them. Something about Henry felt important. Maybe it was the way he spoke earlier, with such quiet dignity despite being humiliated. Or maybe it was the fact that she saw a reflection of her own struggles in his weary expression. Whatever it was, she decided then and there that kindness mattered more than judgment. "Would you like something to drink, Mr. Bennett?" Emily asked gently, gesturing toward the small refreshment station near the back of the store. "We have water, tea, or coffee." Henry hesitated for a moment before nodding. "That would be lovely, thank you," he said softly. As Emily fetched him a glass of water, Olivia rolled her eyes so hard it looked like they might get stuck. "Unbelievable," Olivia muttered under her breath. "Next thing you know, she'll be offering him a free spa day." Emily handed the glass to Henry with a warm smile, ignoring the snickers behind her. "Here you go, sir. Is there anything else I can help you find?" Henry took a sip of water, his hands steadying slightly around the glass. Then he looked up at Emily, his gaze thoughtful. "You remind me of someone," he said after a pause. "Someone very special. Good things happen to good people, dear. Remember that." Before Emily could respond, Henry surprised her by asking, "Do you think you could show me your finest suits? I need 10 of them." The room went silent. Even Victoria stopped mid-sneer, her jaw dropping slightly. 10 luxury suits? At Luxe Elite, where each suit cost upwards of $25,000, this wasn't just a purchase, it was a life-changing transaction. For a brief moment, everyone stared at Henry as if trying to figure out whether he was joking. Olivia recovered first, leaning over to whisper loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He probably thinks luxury means polyester blends from Walmart." The other employees stifled laughter, but Emily remained focused on Henry. "Of course," she said warmly, leading him toward the men's formalwear section. "Let me show you our best options." For the next several minutes, Emily guided Henry through the racks, pulling out exquisite suits in rich fabrics and tailored cuts. He nodded approvingly at each selection, occasionally commenting on the craftsmanship or asking about specific details. Despite the whispers and mocking glances from her co-workers, Emily stayed professional, answering his questions patiently and ensuring he felt respected. Finally, they reached the checkout counter. The total came to $250,000, a staggering amount that made even Victoria's cold demeanor crack. Her eyes widened greedily as she stepped forward, eager to close the sale herself. But Henry shook his head firmly. "I'd prefer Miss Carter handle this," he said, gesturing toward Emily. Victoria's face turned red with fury, but she bit her tongue and retreated, muttering under her breath. Just as Emily began processing the payment, disaster struck. Henry reached into his jacket pocket, only to frown deeply. "Oh no," he murmured, patting his pockets again. "I seem to have forgotten my wallet." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one by one, the staff erupted into laughter. Olivia doubled over, clutching her stomach. "Oh my God," she gasped between giggles. "This is priceless. He walks in here acting like royalty, and now we find out he's flat broke." Even Victoria joined in, her laugh sharp and cutting. "What did I tell you, Emily?" she spat, glaring daggers at her employee. "This whole thing was a waste of time. You've embarrassed us all with your pathetic attempt to play hero." Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she turned to Henry, whose face had flushed with embarrassment. "It's okay, Mr. Bennet," she said quietly. "These things happen. Let me call you a cab." "No," Victoria interrupted, stepping forward with venom in her voice. "That's it. You're fired, Emily. Pack your things and leave. Right now." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. "Fired? Over this?" She opened her mouth to protest, but Victoria cut her off with a wave of her hand. "Don't bother arguing. You've proven time and again that you don't belong here. Get out." As Emily numb ways, humiliation washing over her, Henry suddenly straightened, his expression hardening. "Wait just a moment," he said firmly, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. "Miss Carter has shown more integrity in the past hour than any of you have shown in your entire lives. And mark my words, you'll regret treating her this way." With that, Henry pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Send my driver," he instructed calmly. Then, turning to Emily, he added, "Come with me, my dear. We have much to discuss." And just like that, Emily's world began to change, for better or worse. Emily stepped out of Luxe Elite Boutique, her heart heavy but her head held high. Tears streaked her cheeks, but she wiped them away quickly, refusing to let Victoria's cruelty have the last word. She had done nothing wrong, she had simply chosen kindness over judgment, humanity over greed. As she walked down the bustling streets of Manhattan, clutching the box containing her few belongings from the store, she reminded herself that dignity wasn't something anyone could take away from her. Meanwhile, Henry Bennet climbed into a sleek black luxury car waiting outside the boutique. The driver tipped his hat respectfully as Henry settled into the plush leather seat. "Home, sir?" the driver asked, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. "Yes, thank you," Henry replied, his voice calm but tinged with resolve. He leaned back against the seat, his mind replaying the events of the past hour. Emily's quiet strength and unwavering compassion had left an indelible mark on him. In a world where so many people judged others based on appearances, she had seen beyond the surface, and for that, he would make sure she was rewarded. The car pulled up to an opulent estate nestled in one of New York City's most exclusive neighborhoods. Gilded gates swung open automatically, revealing manicured lawns, towering fountains, and a sprawling mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Henry exited the vehicle and made his way inside, greeted by a team of impeccably dressed staff members who moved with practiced precision. But Henry didn't linger in the grand foyer. Instead, he headed straight for his son's office, a spacious room lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's gardens. Logan Bennett, CEO of Lux Elite and one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city, sat behind a polished mahogany desk, reviewing documents on a tablet. At 35, Logan was every bit as formidable as his father, though his sharp suits and commanding presence often masked the softer side he rarely showed to anyone. "Logan," Henry said as he entered the room, closing the door firmly behind him. "We need to talk." Logan looked up, surprised by the urgency in his father's tone. "Dad? What's going on?" Henry took a seat across from his son and placed a small USB drive on the desk. "I want you to watch this," he said simply. When Logan raised an eyebrow in confusion, Henry added, "It's security footage from your boutique today. Pay close attention to the young woman named Emily Carter." Curiosity piqued, Logan inserted the USB drive into his computer and opened the video file. The footage began playing, showing Emily assisting Henry despite the ridicule and mockery from her co-workers. Logan watched intently as Emily offered Henry water, guided him through the store with patience and respect, and stood up for him when others treated him poorly. Even after Henry admitted to forgetting his wallet, Emily remained composed and kind, offering to call him a cab without hesitation. Logan's expression softened as he watched. By the time the video ended, there was a flicker of admiration in his eyes, a rare emotion for someone accustomed to seeing only numbers and profits. "She risked everything for you," Logan murmured, leaning back in his chair. "Even knowing who I am, most people wouldn't dare defy Victoria Hayes like that." Henry nodded gravely. "Exactly. That's why I brought this to your attention. This young woman has integrity, Logan. Integrity is a rare quality these days, especially in the business world. And if we're going to build a legacy that lasts, we need people like her, not just those who care about climbing the corporate ladder." Logan tapped his fingers thoughtfully against the desk, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on being able to spot potential in others, and something about Emily resonated deeply with him. Her actions spoke volumes about her character, and in his line of work, character mattered more than anything else. "Find her," Logan said finally, his voice firm. "I want to meet her." Henry smiled, pleased with his son's decision. "Good. Because I think she might surprise you, in the best possible way." As Logan picked up his phone to instruct his assistant to locate Emily, Henry gazed out the window, lost in thought. He knew that moments like these, the ones where kindness intersected with opportunity, had the power to change lives forever. And he couldn't wait to see what the future held for Emily Carter. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of Emily's neighborhood. It wasn't the kind of place you'd find on postcards or in glossy magazines, just a quiet corner of Brooklyn where life moved at its own pace. Emily trudged up the steps to her modest apartment building, her mind still replaying the events of the day. She had lost her job, been humiliated in front of everyone, and yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about Henry Bennett was different. There had been a kindness in his eyes, a quiet strength that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, things weren't as bleak as they seemed. As she reached the entrance, a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb. The car gleamed under the fading sunlight, looking completely out of place among the faded brick buildings and graffiti-covered walls. Emily paused, staring at it curiously. What was a car like that doing here? Before she could think too much about it, the door opened, and a sharply dressed man stepped out. He looked to be in his early 30s, with neatly styled dark hair, a tailored suit, and an air of professionalism that screamed executive. His name was Ethan Clark, though Emily didn't know that yet. All she saw was someone who clearly didn't belong in this part of town. "Miss Carter?" Ethan asked, approaching her with a polite smile. His voice was calm and measured, but there was an intensity behind his words that caught Emily off guard. "Yes," she replied cautiously, clutching her box of belongings tighter. "Who are you?" "My name is Ethan Clark," he said, extending a hand. When Emily hesitated, he lowered his arm without missing a beat. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Logan Bennett. He would like to meet with you." Emily blinked, certain she must have misheard him. "Logan Bennett? As in, the CEO of Lux Elite?" Ethan nodded, unfazed by her skepticism. "That's correct. His father, Mr. Henry Bennett, spoke highly of you after your encounter today. Mr. Bennett believes you may have qualities that align with the values of their company, and he'd like to discuss potential opportunities with you." For a moment, Emily simply stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or walk away. This had to be some kind of prank, right? After everything that had happened today, the mockery, the firing, the humiliation, why would someone like Logan Bennett even care about her? And why would his assistant show up in a limousine to deliver such a bizarre message? "I'm sorry," Emily said finally, shaking her head. "But I don't understand. Why would Mr. Bennett want to meet me? I'm just nobody." Ethan's expression softened slightly, as if he understood her disbelief. "You're not nobody, Miss Carter. From what I've been told, your actions today spoke volumes about your character. Integrity isn't something we come across every day, especially in the business world. Mr. Bennett values people who prioritize kindness and authenticity over profit and status. That's why he wants to speak with you." Emily shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Ethan and the waiting limousine. Part of her wanted to dismiss the whole thing as ridiculous, a cruel joke orchestrated by Victoria or one of her coworkers. But another part of her, the part that had always believed in second chances and unexpected miracles, wondered if this might actually be real. What did she have to lose, anyway? Her job was already gone, and her pride had taken enough hits for one day. "Okay," she said quietly, surprising even herself. "I'll go." Ethan's smile widened, and he gestured toward the limousine. "Please, allow me." He opened the door for her, revealing plush leather seats and a minibar stocked with bottled water and champagne. Emily hesitated for a split second before climbing inside, clutching her box tightly in her lap. As the door closed behind her, she felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension bubbling in her chest. The limousine began to move, gliding smoothly through the streets as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows. Emily stared out at the passing scenery, her mind racing with questions. Who exactly were these Bennetts? What did they want from her? And how could one act of kindness possibly lead to something like this? Ethan sat across from her, scrolling through his phone but occasionally glancing up to gauge her reaction. Sensing her unease, he offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Miss Carter. You're not in any trouble. If anything, tonight might change your life, for the better." Emily forced a small smile in return, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Still, as the limousine sped toward an unknown destination, she allowed herself to hope, just a little, that maybe, just maybe, good things really did happen to good people. The limousine slowed to a stop in front of the Bennett estate, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had seen pictures of mansions like this in magazines, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The sprawling property was illuminated by soft golden lights that highlighted its grandeur, the towering columns, the manicured gardens, the shimmering fountains. It looked more like a palace than a home. Ethan opened the door for her, and Emily stepped out hesitantly, clutching her box of belongings as if it were a lifeline. "This way, Miss Carter," he said politely, leading her up the stone pathway to the mansion's entrance. As they approached, the massive double doors swung open, revealing an opulent foyer adorned with crystal chandeliers and marble floors so polished she could almost see her reflection. Emily felt completely out of place, her worn-out sneakers squeaking faintly against the pristine floor. A butler greeted them and gestured for her to follow him down a long hallway lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. Her heart raced with every step. What was she doing here? This wasn't her world, it couldn't be. Finally, they reached a set of ornate wooden doors, which the butler opened silently. Inside was Logan Bennett himself, seated behind a desk that seemed large enough to anchor a ship. He stood as Emily entered, his sharp suit and commanding presence making her feel even smaller than she already did. But there was something in his eyes, something softer than she expected, that put her slightly at ease. "Miss Carter," Logan said, extending a hand. His voice was calm but carried an undeniable authority. "Thank you for coming." Emily shook his hand awkwardly, her own trembling slightly. "Mr. Bennett. I'm not sure why I'm here. Your assistant said you wanted to meet me?" Logan nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat across from him. "Yes, I do. Let me start by saying that my father spoke very highly of you after your encounter today. He told me how you treated him with kindness and respect when others dismissed him outright. That kind of integrity is rare, Miss Carter, and it's exactly what I value most in the people I work with." Emily blinked, stunned. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, as if her actions truly mattered. I didn't do anything special," she stammered. "I just tried to be decent." Logan smiled faintly, leaning forward slightly. "Being decent isn't nothing, Miss Carter. In fact, it's everything. You stood up for my father when no one else would. You chose compassion over judgment, even though it cost you dearly. That tells me a lot about who you are, and it's the kind of person I want working alongside me." Before Emily could respond, Logan continued. "Which brings me to why I asked you here tonight. I'd like to offer you a position as my personal assistant. It's a high-level role, and the compensation will reflect that. You'll have access to resources, training, and opportunities that most people can only dream of. All I ask is that you bring the same honesty and dedication you showed my father into everything you do." Emily stared at him, her mind reeling. A job like this? Working directly for Logan Bennett? It sounded impossible, like something out of a movie. But doubt quickly crept in. "Mr. Bennett, I appreciate the offer, really, I do," she began hesitantly. "But I don't have any experience in corporate settings. I've never worked anywhere near this level. I wouldn't even know where to begin." Logan nodded, clearly expecting her hesitation. "Experience can be taught, Miss Carter. Character cannot. And yours speaks volumes. Besides," he added with a small smile, "you won't be alone. We'll provide all the support you need to succeed." Just then, Henry appeared in the doorway, having overheard their conversation. He walked into the room, his presence warm and reassuring. "Emily, my dear," he said gently, "don't let fear hold you back. You have a gift, a natural ability to connect with people and make them feel valued. That's something money can't buy. Trust yourself." Emily looked between Logan and Henry, torn between excitement and uncertainty. Could she really step into a world so far removed from her own? Was she brave enough to take this leap of faith? After a long pause, she took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay," she said quietly, determination flickering in her eyes. "I'll do it." Henry beamed, while Logan offered a satisfied smile. "Welcome to the team, Miss Carter," he said, extending his hand once more. "You won't regret this." As Emily shook his hand, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her, a sense that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change in ways she never imagined. Back at Luxe Elite Boutique, the news of Emily's sudden rise had spread like wildfire. Victoria Hayes paced furiously in her office, her stiletto heels clicking angrily against the hardwood floor. Her perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists as she replayed the story in her mind. How dare that little nobody waltz out of their store only to land a job working directly for Logan Bennett? It was infuriating, humiliating, even. She doesn't belong there, Victoria muttered under her breath, glaring at her reflection in the window. She's trash. A charity case. There's no way she earned that position. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Before she could respond, it creaked open, revealing Madeline Pierce, a strikingly beautiful woman with platinum blonde hair, designer sunglasses perched atop her head, and an air of entitled arrogance that matched Victoria's own. Madeline was Logan's ex-fiancée, a socialite known for her sharp tongue and manipulative tactics. Their engagement had ended abruptly months ago, but Madeline still clung to the belief that she was destined to win him back. "Victoria," Madeline purred, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I heard about your little problem." Victoria turned sharply, her lips curling into a sneer. "What are you talking about?" Madeline smirked, closing the door behind her. "Don't play coy. I know all about Emily Carter, the girl who humiliated you in front of everyone and somehow landed herself a golden ticket straight into Logan's inner circle." She crossed the room and perched elegantly on the edge of Victoria's desk, her tone dripping with mockery. "Honestly, darling, how does it feel knowing someone like her is now sitting where you should be?" Victoria's face flushed with anger, but she quickly masked it with a cold smile. "Oh, don't worry about me. I have plans for Miss Carter. Plans that will ensure she regrets ever setting foot in this city." Madeline raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Do tell." Victoria leaned in closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "We frame her. Make it look like she stole something from the boutique, or better yet, from Logan himself. Once we plant enough evidence, they'll have no choice but to fire her. Maybe even press charges." Madeline's eyes lit up with malicious delight. "Now that's more like it. But framing her won't be enough. We need to hit her where it hurts, her reputation. Let's leak rumors to the press about how she seduced her way into Logan's good graces. No one likes a gold digger, after all." The two women exchanged a sly grin, their shared hatred for Emily binding them together in a twisted alliance. For Victoria, this was personal, a chance to reclaim her authority and crush the girl who had dared to defy her. For Madeline, it was strategic, a way to eliminate any competition standing between her and Logan. "Leave everything to me," Victoria said confidently, already envisioning Emily's downfall. "By the time we're done, she'll wish she'd never been born." Madeline stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced elegance. "Perfect. Just make sure you keep me updated. And remember, if she falls too quickly, it won't be nearly as satisfying." With that, Madeline sauntered out of the office, leaving Victoria alone with her schemes. As the door clicked shut, Victoria pulled out her phone and began typing furiously, setting their plan into motion. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about power. And Victoria intended to take back every ounce of it. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the storm brewing in her direction, Emily settled into her new role at the Bennett estate, blissfully ignorant of the enemies plotting her destruction. It started innocently enough, a quiet morning at the Bennett estate. Emily had been settling into her new role as Logan's personal assistant with surprising ease. She was still adjusting to the opulence of her surroundings and the weight of her responsibilities, but she approached every task with determination and grace. Her hard work hadn't gone unnoticed, even Logan had complimented her efficiency during their morning meeting. But little did Emily know, trouble was brewing just beneath the surface. Later that afternoon, while organizing documents in Logan's office, Emily received a call from Ethan Clark. "Miss Carter," he said urgently, "there's someone here from Luxe Elite Boutique claiming they need to speak with you about an urgent matter. They're downstairs." Confused but obliging, Emily made her way to the grand foyer. Waiting for her was Victoria Hayes, flanked by two security guards who looked more like bouncers than boutique employees. Victoria's lips curled into a smug smile as Emily approached. "Emily Carter," Victoria began dramatically, her voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby staff members. "We've discovered that a very valuable necklace, worth over $100,000, has gone missing from our inventory. Imagine our surprise when we reviewed the security footage and saw you handling it on your last day." Emily froze, her mind racing. "What? That's impossible. I didn't take anything, I wouldn't." Victoria ignored her protests, snapping her fingers. One of the security guards stepped forward, holding up a small velvet pouch. Inside was the glittering diamond necklace in question. "This was found in your bag earlier today," he announced sternly. "How do you explain that?" "I don't know how it got there," Emily exclaimed, panic rising in her chest. "I swear, I didn't put it there." But before she could say more, Madeline Pierce appeared seemingly out of nowhere, her presence commanding immediate attention. Dressed in a sleek designer dress and dripping with jewelry, she addressed the growing crowd of onlookers. "Oh dear," she said with feigned sympathy, her tone laced with venom. "It seems poor Emily has been caught red-handed. Stealing isn't exactly the best way to climb the social ladder, is it?" Whispers erupted among the staff, and Emily felt her cheeks burn with shame. Before she could defend herself further, Logan arrived, drawn by the commotion. His sharp gaze swept over the scene, taking in Victoria's triumphant smirk, Madeline's theatrical display, and Emily's wide-eyed distress. "What's going on here?" Logan demanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. Victoria stepped forward, her expression one of mock concern. "Mr. Bennett, we regret to inform you that your assistant has been implicated in a serious theft. This necklace was recovered from her belongings, and the evidence against her is overwhelming." Logan turned to Emily, his expression unreadable. For a moment, fear gripped her heart. What if he believed them? What if all her efforts to prove herself were undone in an instant? But then something unexpected happened. Instead of jumping to conclusions, Logan studied her face intently. He saw no guilt, only confusion and desperation. And deep down, he trusted his instincts, and the character he'd witnessed firsthand. "Ethan," Logan said calmly, turning to his assistant, "gather all available security footage from Luxe Elite Boutique for the past week. I want a full investigation conducted immediately." Madeline gasped theatrically. "Surely you're not suggesting we doubt the word of these fine people? The evidence speaks for itself." Logan's eyes narrowed as he leveled a cold stare at her. "The evidence will be examined thoroughly, Miss Pierce. Until then, I suggest everyone refrain from making assumptions, or spreading rumors." His words silenced the room, leaving Victoria and Madeline visibly seething. As the crowd dispersed, Logan placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "We'll get to the bottom of this." Though gratitude swelled in her chest, Emily couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. The investigation unfolded quickly, thanks to Logan's relentless determination and resources. Within hours, Ethan Clark had obtained the security footage from Luxe Elite Boutique, meticulously reviewing every frame for answers. What they discovered was damning evidence that left no room for doubt. Victoria Hayes and Madeline Pierce had orchestrated the entire scheme against Emily. Logan called an emergency meeting of the Luxe Elite board members later that evening, ensuring both Victoria and Madeline were present. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone gathered around the sleek conference table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. Emily sat quietly beside Logan, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, unsure of what to expect. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Logan began, his voice calm but commanding. He stood at the head of the table, projecting confidence that silenced any murmurs. "We're here to address serious allegations made against my assistant, Miss Emily Carter. However, before we proceed, I believe it's important to examine the facts." With that, He nodded to Ethan, who dimmed the lights and played the surveillance footage on a large screen mounted at the front of the room. The video clearly showed Victoria slipping the diamond necklace into Emily's bag while she wasn't looking. Another clip revealed Madeline coaching Victoria, instructing her on how to plant the item and spread rumors afterward. Gasps rippled through the room as the truth came to light. Victoria's face turned pale, her lips trembling as she realized her plan had unraveled. Madeline, however, remained composed, at least outwardly. Her icy glare darted between Logan and Emily, her jaw clenched with barely contained fury. "This is outrageous," Victoria finally blurted out, her voice shaking. "That footage must have been tampered with. There's no way." "Enough," Logan interrupted sharply, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You've been caught red-handed, Victoria. Not only did you attempt to frame an innocent woman, but you also violated the trust of this company. Effective immediately, you're fired." The words hit like a thunderclap. Victoria slumped back in her chair, tears streaming down her face as the weight of her actions crashed down on her. But Logan wasn't finished yet. "As for you, Madeline," he continued, turning his piercing gaze toward her, "your involvement in this conspiracy is equally unforgivable. Your reputation thrives on manipulation and deceit, but today, the world will see you for who you truly are." Madeline rose to her feet, her composure cracking under the pressure. "You think this changes anything?" she spat venomously, pointing a manicured finger at Logan. "Do you really believe she's good enough for someone like you? She's nothing, a nobody who got lucky." Her words hung heavy in the air, but Logan didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer, his expression colder than ever. "Emily's worth far exceeds yours, Madeline. Unlike you, she doesn't need lies or schemes to succeed. And mark my words, if you try to retaliate, I'll make sure the public knows exactly what kind of person you are." Defeated but defiant, Madeline stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. As the remaining board members whispered amongst themselves, Logan turned to Emily, offering her a reassuring smile. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, relief washing over her in waves. For the first time since the ordeal began, she allowed herself to breathe again. Yet even as gratitude filled her heart, she couldn't ignore the lingering sense of unease. Madeline's parting threat echoed ominously in her mind. Outside the building, Madeline climbed into her luxury car, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her reflection in the rearview mirror revealed a woman consumed by rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," she muttered darkly to herself. "Not by a long shot." And with that, she sped off into the night, vowing revenge. In the days following the exposure of Victoria and Madeline's plot, life at the Bennett estate began to settle into a new rhythm. Emily threw herself into her work with renewed energy, determined to prove that Logan's faith in her was well placed. She handled every task with precision and care, earning the respect of those around her, including Logan himself. But something had shifted between them. Logan found himself watching Emily more closely than before, noticing details he'd overlooked in the chaos of recent events. The way her eyes lit up when she solved a problem. The quiet determination in her voice during meetings. The kindness she extended to everyone, regardless of their position or status. It wasn't just admiration, it was something deeper, something he couldn't quite put into words. One evening, as the city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Logan's office, Emily sat at a nearby desk, typing furiously to finish a report. Logan glanced up from his laptop, his gaze lingering on her profile. He realized they were the only two left in the building, the hum of the city below providing a soothing backdrop to the silence between them. "You should have gone home hours ago," Logan said finally, breaking the quiet. His tone was gentle, almost teasing, but there was an undercurrent of concern beneath it. Emily looked up, startled by the sound of his voice. "Oh, I didn't want to leave this unfinished." Besides, you're still here too. Logan chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. Fair point. But even CEOs need to sleep sometimes. She smiled faintly, returning her attention to the screen. Almost done. Just give me 5 more minutes. Logan watched her for a moment longer, debating whether to say what had been weighing on his mind. Finally, he stood and walked over to her desk, his movements deliberate. Emily, he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability, I've been meaning to ask you something. Her fingers paused mid-keystroke, and she turned to face him, curiosity flickering in her eyes. What is it? He hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair, a rare sign of uncertainty from someone who always seemed so composed. You've been through a lot recently, more than anyone should have to endure. And yet, you've handled everything with grace and strength. I admire that about you. More than I expected to. Emily blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his words. Thank you, she murmured, unsure how else to respond. Logan took a deep breath, steeling himself. What I'm trying to say is, I'd like to take you out. On a proper date. Not as my assistant, but as yourself. Would you consider that? The room seemed to hold its breath. Emily stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Logan Bennett, CEO, billionaire, and one of the most powerful men in the city, was asking her out? It felt surreal, like something out of a movie. Yet, looking into his earnest eyes, she knew he meant every word. She started, her voice barely above a whisper. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part, the cautious, practical side, hesitated. Are you sure? I mean, we work together. Wouldn't that be complicated? Logan shook his head firmly. Life's too short to worry about complications. Besides, he added with a small smile, you've already proven that you can handle anything thrown your way, including me. Despite her reservations, Emily couldn't suppress a laugh at his self-deprecating humor. She studied him for a moment, searching for any hint of insincerity, but found none. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, she said softly, a shy smile tugging at her lips. I'd like that. Relief and joy washed over Logan's face, lighting it up in a way Emily hadn't seen before. Good, he replied, his voice warm. Then it's a date. As they packed up their things and prepared to leave the office, Emily couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement, and maybe something more. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope that happiness might truly be within reach. Just when Emily thought her life was finally falling into place, trouble came knocking once again, this time in the form of Lucy Harper, Logan's jealous ex-girlfriend and a notorious gossip columnist known for her sharp pen and sharper tongue. Lucy had been quietly observing Logan and Emily's growing closeness from afar, seething with resentment. To her, Emily was nothing more than an opportunistic nobody who didn't deserve someone like Logan. Determined to tear them apart, Lucy began spreading vicious rumors in the media. Tabloids exploded with headlines questioning Emily's intentions. Is she after his fortune? From rags to riches, how far will she go? The stories painted Emily as a gold digger, using fabricated quotes and doctored photos to support their claims. Within days, the scandal dominated social media, casting a shadow over everything Emily had worked so hard to achieve. The backlash reached its peak when Lady Margaret Bennett, Logan's formidable mother and one of New York's most influential socialites, arrived at the Bennett estate unannounced. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit and carrying herself with regal authority, Lady Margaret wasted no time getting to the point. Logan, she said sharply, striding into his office where Emily was helping him review documents, we need to talk. Privately. Logan glanced up, immediately sensing the tension in her tone. Mother, whatever it is, you can say it in front of Emily. She's part of this team. Lady Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, her disapproval evident. Very well, she replied curtly, turning her icy gaze toward Emily. Miss Carter, I won't mince words. You are beneath my son, not just socially, but morally. These rumors about your relationship have tarnished our family's reputation, and I will not stand by while you drag us further into disgrace. Emily felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she stood her ground, meeting Lady Margaret's glare with quiet resolve. I understand your concerns, Mrs. Bennet, but I assure you, I've done nothing wrong. My relationship with Logan is based on mutual respect, not some ulterior motive. Lady Margaret scoffed, clearly unconvinced. Respect? Don't insult my intelligence, child. Do you honestly think someone like you could ever be worthy of someone like him? Before Logan could intervene, his mother pulled out a checkbook and scribbled something hastily. She tore off the check and held it out to Emily. Here, she said coldly. $5 million. Take it and walk away from my son. Disappear quietly, and we'll forget this entire debacle ever happened. The room fell silent. Emily stared at the check, her heart pounding. $5 million, a sum that could change her life forever. It would mean financial security for her and Jake, freedom from the struggles they'd endured for years. But accepting it would also mean giving up everything she'd fought for, the trust she'd built, the integrity she'd maintained, and the chance at happiness with Logan. Slowly, Emily reached out and took the check, but only to hand it back to Lady Margaret. Thank you for the offer, she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. But I'm not interested. I care about Logan, not his money or your approval. If he chooses to stand by me, then that's all that matters. Lady Margaret's eyes widened in shock, clearly unaccustomed to being defied. You're making a grave mistake, she warned, her voice dripping with disdain. Mark my words, this won't end well for you. Logan stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Emily's shoulder. That's enough, Mother, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Emily has proven herself time and again. If you can't accept her, then that's your loss, not ours. Lady Margaret glared at both of them before storming out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was heavy, but Emily felt a strange sense of relief. She had faced one of the most powerful women in the city, and refused to back down. Logan turned to Emily, his expression softening. Are you okay? He asked gently. She nodded, managing a small smile. I'm fine. As long as I know I did the right thing, nothing else matters. But even as they shared a moment of quiet solidarity, neither of them realized that Lucy's schemes were far from over, and the worst was yet to come. The calm that had settled over Logan and Emily's lives was shattered one fateful morning when chaos erupted at Lux Elite. Financial markets opened to a firestorm of headlines as confidential documents from the company were leaked online, revealing sensitive information about mismanagement, inflated profits, and questionable business practices. Investors panicked, and within hours, Lux Elite stock plummeted, wiping out billions in value. Logan arrived at his office to find his team scrambling to contain the damage. Phones rang non-stop, analysts shouted orders, and screens displayed graphs plunging into freefall. Ethan Clark approached him with a grim expression, holding a tablet showing the leaked files. Sir, it's bad, he said tersely. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for, and how to hurt us. Logan's jaw tightened as anger simmered beneath his composed exterior. Find out who's behind this. Now. Meanwhile, Madeline Pierce and Lucy Harper sat in a sleek penthouse apartment, sipping champagne and watching the news coverage unfold on a massive flat-screen TV. Their plan had worked perfectly, or so they thought. By leaking the documents, they had hoped to destroy Logan's reputation, force him to step down as CEO, and leave Emily humiliated and unemployed once again. This is just the beginning, Madeline said smugly, swirling her glass. Once Logan loses everything, he'll come crawling back to me. And Emily? She'll be nothing but a distant memory. Lucy smirked, raising her glass in a toast to revenge. But their celebration was short-lived. Back at the Bennett estate, Logan worked tirelessly with his cybersecurity team to trace the source of the leak. It didn't take long for them to uncover evidence linking the breach directly to Madeline's personal laptop. Further investigation revealed Lucy's involvement as well. Emails exchanged between the two conspirators left no room for doubt. Armed with irrefutable proof, Logan contacted the authorities immediately. Within hours, police raided Madeline's penthouse, arresting both her and Lucy on charges of corporate sabotage, fraud, and conspiracy. Cameras captured the humiliating scene as Madeline was led out in handcuffs, her designer clothes and perfectly styled hair doing little to mask her fury. "This isn't over," she screamed, glaring daggers at the reporters gathered outside. "You haven't seen the last of me, Logan." At Lux Elite, news of the arrest spread quickly, restoring some semblance of order to the company. Logan addressed his employees in a brief but powerful statement, vowing to rebuild and strengthen the brand. "We will not be defined by those who sought to bring us down," he declared. "Together, we will rise stronger than ever." Later that evening, Logan returned home to find Emily waiting for him in the study. Her face was lined with worry, but her eyes softened when she saw him. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. He sighed, running a hand through his hair as he sank onto the couch beside her. "I'm fine. Angry, yes, but relieved it's over. Thanks to you, I know what really matters now." Emily frowned, confused. "Me? What did I do?" "You reminded me why integrity matters," Logan explained, taking her hand in his. "If I hadn't learned from your example, to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, I might have let them win. But instead, we fought back, and we won." Emily smiled faintly, squeezing his hand. "We make a good team." Logan chuckled softly, pulling her closer. "That we do. And if you'll have me, I'd like to keep fighting alongside you, for the rest of our lives." As they sat together, the weight of recent events slowly lifting, Emily realized something profound. Despite the storms they'd weathered, love and trust had carried them through. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In the weeks following Madeline and Lucy's arrest, life began to stabilize for Emily and Logan. The scandal surrounding Lux Elite slowly faded as the company worked to rebuild its reputation, bolstered by Logan's unwavering leadership. Yet, even as things settled into a new rhythm, one lingering challenge remained: Lady Margaret Bennett. Lady Margaret had kept her distance since their heated confrontation, but Emily could feel the tension whenever they crossed paths. Though she tried not to let it bother her, there was no denying that Logan's mother held immense influence over his world, and earning her approval mattered more than Emily cared to admit. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily received an unexpected invitation to tea at Lady Margaret's penthouse in Manhattan. Hesitant but determined to face whatever came next, she arrived dressed simply yet elegantly, clutching a small bouquet of flowers as a gesture of goodwill. The doorman escorted her upstairs, where Lady Margaret awaited in a lavishly decorated sitting room overlooking Central Park. "Thank you for coming," Lady Margaret said stiffly, motioning for Emily to sit. Her tone was polite but guarded, leaving little room for warmth. A maid served tea, and the two women sat in silence for several moments, the clinking of china filling the space between them. Finally, Lady Margaret spoke. "I've spent a great deal of time reflecting on recent events," she began, her voice measured. "You've shown remarkable resilience in the face of adversity, far more than I expected. When I offered you that check, I assumed you'd take it and disappear. But instead, you stood your ground. You proved me wrong." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected admission. "Mrs. Bennet," she started, unsure how to respond. Lady Margaret raised a hand to silence her. "Let me finish. I misjudged you, Emily. I saw only what I wanted to see, a young woman from humble beginnings who couldn't possibly belong in our world. But you've demonstrated strength, integrity, and loyalty, qualities far rarer than wealth or status. And for that, I owe you an apology." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, though she fought to keep them at bay. She hadn't anticipated this moment, not after everything they'd been through. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." Lady Margaret nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Logan has always been headstrong, but he's also fiercely protective of those he cares about. If he's chosen you, then I trust his judgment. Just, don't hurt him, Emily. He's stronger than he seems, but even the strongest hearts can break." "I would never," Emily replied earnestly, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling within her. "I love him, Mrs. Bennet. More than anything." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. For the first time, Lady Margaret's gaze softened, and she reached across the table to pat Emily's hand gently. "Then welcome to the family, my dear." The weight of those words settled over Emily like a warm embrace. It wasn't just acceptance, it was acknowledgement. In that moment, she knew she had finally earned Lady Margaret's respect. Later that evening, Emily returned to the Bennet estate, where Logan waited for her in the study. He looked up as she entered, immediately noticing the brightness in her eyes. "How did it go?" he asked, setting aside the documents he'd been reviewing. Emily smiled, crossing the room to sit beside him. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Your mother apologized, and she said she accepts us." "Us, Logan." Logan's expression shifted from surprise to relief, and then to joy. "That's incredible," he murmured, pulling her into his arms. "She doesn't give her approval easily, you know. You must have really impressed her." "It wasn't easy," Emily confessed with a laugh. "But I think we both understand each other now. And honestly, I'm glad. Because I want us to move forward, together." Logan kissed her forehead tenderly, his voice filled with conviction. "We will. No matter what comes next, we'll face it side by side." As they sat together, wrapped in the quiet comfort of their shared future, Emily realized something beautiful. Love wasn't about perfection, it was about growth. Through every trial, every misunderstanding, and every triumph, they had found their way to each other. And nothing, not jealousy, betrayal, or prejudice, could ever tear them apart. The Bennet estate had been transformed into a fairy tale setting for the wedding of the year. White roses cascaded down trellises lining the gardens, their petals glistening with morning dew under the golden sunlight. Crystal chandeliers hung from towering trees, casting shimmering reflections onto the perfectly manicured lawn. Guests dressed in elegant attire mingled and marveled at the opulence surrounding them, but all eyes were on Emily as she prepared to walk down the aisle. Inside the mansion, Emily stood before a full-length mirror, adjusting the delicate lace veil that framed her glowing face. Her gown, a masterpiece of intricate embroidery in flowing silk, fit her like a dream, accentuating her grace and beauty. Beside her, Jake, now 12 years old and standing tall as the ring-bearer, grinned proudly. "You look amazing, sis," he said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. Emily smiled, pulling him into a quick hug. "Thank you, Jake. None of this would have happened without you." A soft knock on the door interrupted their moment. Henry Bennet stepped inside, his warm smile lighting up the room. In his hands, he held a small velvet box. "May I have a word, my dear?" he asked gently. "Of course," Emily replied, gesturing for him to sit. She joined him, curiosity sparking in her eyes. Henry opened the box to reveal a stunning family heirloom necklace, an antique piece adorned with sapphires and diamonds. "This belonged to my late wife," he explained, his voice thick with nostalgia. "She always believed in kindness, just as you do. I can think of no one more deserving to carry it forward than you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she accepted the gift. I don't know what to say, thank you, Henry. It's beautiful. He patted her hand affectionately. Good things happen to good people, Emily. Remember that today, and every day. As the ceremony began, Emily made her way down the aisle, escorted by Henry. Every step felt surreal, yet deeply meaningful. At the end of the aisle stood Logan, his gaze locked onto hers with unspoken devotion. Dressed in a classic black tuxedo, he looked every bit the dashing groom, but it was the love in his eyes that stole her breath away. When they reached each other, Logan took her hands in his voice steady and heartfelt. "You've made me the happiest man alive," he whispered, earning a soft laugh from Emily. After exchanging vows filled with promises of unwavering support and endless love, Logan surprised everyone during the reception. As Emily sat at their table, he approached her with another velvet box. Inside was a breathtaking diamond necklace worth $30 million, its brilliance rivaling the stars above. With tender care, he placed it around her neck, eliciting gasps from the guests. "For someone who shines brighter than any jewel," he murmured, kissing her cheek. From afar, Victoria Hayes and Madeline Pierce watched bitterly, reduced to mere spectators after their fall from grace. Once queens of their respective worlds, they now stood on the sidelines, their jealousy palpable. But neither dared approach the happy couple, knowing they were no longer welcome in this new chapter of Emily's life. As the night drew to a close, fireworks lit up the sky, painting the heavens with bursts of color. Emily found herself standing beside Henry once more, holding his hand as they watched the display together. "You were right," she said softly, turning to him. "Good things really do happen to good people." Henry chuckled, his eyes twinkling with pride. "And bad things happen to those who deserve them. Karma has a way of balancing the scales." With that, Emily turned back to Logan, who wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her close. Together, they danced under the starlit sky, surrounded by loved ones and the promise of a future built on trust, kindness, and unconditional love. In the end, Emily Carter proved that no matter how daunting the odds, staying true to oneself could lead to the greatest reward of all, a life filled with happiness, purpose, and love. At its heart, Emily Carter's journey is more than just a story of love and triumph. It's a powerful reminder of the enduring value of kindness, integrity, and resilience. In a world that often rewards wealth, status, and ambition above all else, Emily proved that true strength lies in staying true to your values, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you. Her courage to stand up for what was right, her refusal to let jealousy or cruelty dim her spirit, and her unwavering belief in the goodness of people ultimately transformed not only her life but the lives of those around her. This story teaches us that no act of kindness is ever wasted. Whether it's offering compassion to someone who seems invisible or standing firm in the face of adversity, these moments define who we are, and they ripple outward, shaping the world in ways we may never fully understand. As Henry so wisely said, good things happen to good people. But perhaps the greater truth is this: we become the good things that happen when we choose to live with purpose and heart. If Emily's story resonated with you, don't miss the chance to dive into more tales like this one. Stories have the power to inspire, to heal, and to remind us of the infinite possibilities within ourselves. Subscribe to our channel and join a community of dreamers, thinkers, and believers who know that every chapter of life holds the potential for magic. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update, and be the first to experience the next unforgettable journey we bring to life. Because somewhere out there, another story is waiting to change your perspective, and maybe even your life. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments.